Greetings from Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm glad you could make it, and I wish I could have made it too. But here I am in my study. In a poem called What to Remember When Waking, the poet David Whyte examines the moment we all experience on awakening from a night's sleep. Whyte wrote of sleep as a secret place, a place of vitality, a place where everything begins. When you awaken from sleep, he writes, there is a small opening into a new day, which closes the moment you begin your plans. The more I think about Whyte's description of waking, the more precise it seems to me. When we wake from sleep and come back into the world, for one brief moment we simply are. That's it, we just are. And the world, it simply is. Then, much too soon, our brain begins reminding us of things we have to do, of places we have to go. And that brief moment of being has to recede for a while. But Whyte reminds us that our plans, while necessary, are really not enough. He wrote, what you can plan is too small for you to live. What you can live wholeheartedly will make plans enough for you. In other words, being open to living wholeheartedly with vitality takes us beyond the mundane and into a fuller world. But then he wrote a line that really intrigues me. To be human, he wrote, is to become visible. To be human is to become visible. And in a way, we've all spent the last 18 months in varying degrees of visibility. Sensible precautions against a pandemic have caused us to retreat, to shelter within the walls of our homes, to turn away from normal human interaction, to hide our faces behind masks. And all of this is necessary. We separate ourselves out of a shared sense of decency, not just to protect ourselves, but to protect others. We hide behind pandemic walls, not because we want to, but because humanity demands it. The walls protect us all. And of course, we all know those walls are not of our own making. They were built by COVID. And now, of course, there is a vaccine and there is new hope. When I got my vaccine, it was a spring day. And to me, it felt right that hope for healing was starting to happen in the springtime as the world around me was awakening. I thought about another spring years ago when I saw a flower in full bloom, rooted in a cracked stone wall of an abandoned monastery in Italy. It was a beautiful thing to see. The fragility of the flower, not daunted at all by the strength of the wall. The flower finding its way to sunlight by rooting itself in stone. As I drove home from the hospital after getting my vaccine, I had my car windows down and the air was flowing through like something from another realm. And I felt like that flower. I felt like a miracle. There is a crack in the wall, I told myself. That wall that none of us wanted. It's cracking. And we are about to bloom. As the hymn says, Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. As we all know, that feeling came a bit too soon. The pandemic is not over. There is work to be done. And as we slowly awaken from our COVID sleep, a bit too slowly, I think, we wake to a world in pain. While we were sleeping, George Floyd was murdered. While we were sleeping, our country's long struggle with the hypocrisy of the phrase, all men are created equal, took center stage yet again. 2 years ago, I stood in the pulpit of a beautiful Unitarian Universalist church in Boone, North Carolina, and talked about the hate crime that happened at Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church when I was director of Lifespan Religious Education there. The gunman was angry about many things, including something he totally failed to prevent. He tried to stop us, but it didn't work. He was angry about the GLBTQ program we ran at our church to help questioning high school students who just needed to talk in a safe place. We hurt his fragile ego, and he came to kill me. When I went to Boone to give that sermon, it was the first time I had summoned the courage to even enter any church building at all since leaving my job at the Unitarian Church in Knoxville. And ironically, while I was writing that sermon about the hate crime that happened in my church, dozens were killed in the Christchurch mosque shootings. Later, I wrote another sermon to deliver via Zoom to the good people in Boone. And while writing that sermon, people were gunned down in a string of shootings in Atlanta and in a Boulder, Colorado grocery store. As we awaken from COVID, as we move beyond our own protective walls, we awaken to a world in pain, and we have work to do. To become human is to become visible. And then came the poem's next line. We become visible while carrying what is hidden during our sleep and giving it as a gift to others. The walls will come down. But I want to talk to you now about another time, a time when we built literal walls to keep others out. I want to take us back to 1968. And I want to tell you a story about something that happened to me then when I was 11 years old. Back in 1968, there were shootings too. As an 11-year-old, I was keenly aware of what happened to Martin Luther King. I saw the reports from Walter Cronkite on television. I read the newspapers my father scattered across the floor for my mother to pick up. I heard the adults talk. I heard the N-word a whole lot. I heard stories of something called riots after King was murdered. Riots even happened in downtown Chattanooga, not far from our house, where all the black folks lived. But it all seemed so distant to me. Where I grew up, there were no blacks at all. They were all downtown. The world of downtown Chattanooga might as well have been Mars. We never went there. It was only a 10-minute drive. Love your neighbor, they taught me. But looking around, I could see that all the neighbors were white. I didn't realize the meaning of this until my brother David went away to college. He went to MTSU, Middle Tennessee State University, in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, with the intention of avoiding the draft by joining ROTC and getting a bachelor's degree as a step toward entering a Southern Baptist seminary. And while he was at it, he decided, well, I might as well convert everybody on this campus to Christianity. One of his first converts took place on his first day on campus. The convert was a young Nigerian, a student named Abiodun Shote. Abiodun had arrived in Tennessee straight from Lagos, Nigeria, with nothing but one change of clothes, a pair of flip-flops, a straw hat, no jacket, no shoes. He moved into my brother's dorm, and in no time, he became a Christian, all because of my brother. In retrospect, I know that Abiodun didn't have the heart to say to my brother, no thanks, David, I'm good. I'm a Muslim. He just kind of went with the flow. That turned out to be a good move on Abiodun's part, because suddenly my brother and his pals from the Baptist Student Union were taking him to Goodwill for clothes, shoes, and stuff like that. I love that part of the story, how my brother and his friends looked past race and saw a human being and they helped him. Because, that's not how some other people reacted to Abiodun Shote. A couple of years after the TV UUC shooting, I was asked to write an essay about a turning point in my life. I assumed I would write about the TV UUC shooting. But to my surprise, I sat down and wrote about Abiodun Shote. Specifically, I wrote about how in the fall of 1968, when I was 11 years old, my brother brought a black man to our family's church. A black man had never set foot in there, ever. The working title of my essay was, Life is a Mouthful of Pudding. But thankfully, they have a really good editor, and he changed the title to Rediscovering Goodness in the Aftermath of Violence, which is so much better. Anyway, here's a brief section of that essay about Abiodun Shote. You reach a certain age and everything seems to even out. Somebody might say, hey, Brian, describe a turning point in your life. And you might not be stumped exactly, but you might be puzzled. Puzzled because you've told yourself that everything has kind of all evened out. Everything is okay now. All that pain and sorrow and butting of heads has become a comfortable mouthful of pudding. Life is vanilla with a bit of lemon. But that's a lie, of course, because at night you wake and there it is again, the old movie that doesn't end. For example, there's the scene from 1968 when the Baptist ordained your older brother as a minister of the gospel at age 18, and he goes off to the university with a Bible in one hand and an ROTC rifle in the other. He's bright and ambitious and full of the Holy Spirit, and he's one of us. And by God, he's going to march onto that college campus with the cross before him and Satan behind him, and dadgummit, he's going to save himself some souls for Jesus. And he did, too, right away. Right away, he comes home for the weekend with a black guy whose soul he saved. Then on Sunday morning, the two of them march into the Baptist church like it's the most natural thing in the world. And half the church gets up and walks out. True story. Muttering something about N-words taking over. And there you are, age 11, watching men and women you love and admire reduced to quivering, fleshy gelatins of petty, racist anger before your wide and innocent eyes. One of them, your former Sunday school teacher, gets so mad he kills over dead later that day. True story. A heart attack. And the angry ones who don't kill over dead, well, they start their own church in an abandoned garage just down the road. And they act like lily white jerks for the rest of their lives. Pardon me. One lady even calls your mama. And I was on the other line listening. You used to be able to do that. One lady even calls your mama and says, "Where do you Griffins come off bringing N-words to church?" And mama says, "That weren't no N-word. He's from Nigeria." And the lady says, "It's the same dang thing, you moron. If I was 10 years younger, I'd come over there and whoop your sorry behind." And mama says, "Well, take your Geritol and come on, lady. I'm ready for you." That's a true story, and I love my mother for it. So, everything shatters into a broken puzzle, pieces that don't fit well into any life. But dang it, there they are, those broken pieces, neon and flashing, and you are tempted to say, "Gosh darn it, folks, life is awful. I mean, really, it just plain stinks." But you don't say that. Well, you do, but then you take it back and apologize. You take it back and apologize because there were people who didn't lash out in fear and hatred and violence. You take it back because there were people who didn't storm out of that building in anger. There were people who stayed. People who didn't give up. People who kept their faith. People who took that Nigerian guy into their lives and lifted him and themselves up just a little towards something better. They made Jesus proud. There were people who were just good, that's all. Decent people, doing decent things. That's what it all boils down to, really. Decent people, doing decent things. Folks, I would trade all of my pudding to be like those people. And that's how the essay ended. What I didn't put into that essay is what happened later. The people of Middle Valley Baptist Church who did not get angry, as I said, they welcomed Abiodian into that sanctuary, and they welcomed him time and time again. They even set up an Abiodian Shote fund that helped him through college and through medical school, and he is an MD practicing in Lagos, Nigeria right now. Why did they do that? Why did so many people leave the church that morning and not come back? And why did other people who rarely, if ever, interacted with African Americans embrace this young man with open arms and make him feel welcome? Well, ironically, I think the answer lies in the cracks in the wall of deep South segregation. Because there were cracks. really good ones. When I think of Abiodi and Sote sitting on that pew on that Sunday morning, calm and serene while anger seethes around him, I think of that stone wall I saw one spring with a flower blooming rooted in the cracks of the stone. Just by showing up, just by being, Abiodian broke a bit of the wall the congregation had built around itself. Those whose anger blinded them to the beauty of the flower left the church to build their own wall, a wall to shut out what they refused to accept, as though Abiodian were a disease. And those who didn't leave, well, I think the poet David Whyte had it right when he wrote, "To become human is to become visible," because Abiodian was suddenly visible. A black man sitting on a pew in a sanctuary where no black man had ever been. He was there, he was visible, he was a human being. And because he was visible, the good people of that congregation awoke. They came out of their slumber. The small flowering root of Abi and Sote provided for them that small opening into a new day that David Whyte wrote of when he described awakening from sleep. And when they awoke and saw Abiodian as a human, parts of themselves that had suddenly become, and when they awoke and saw Abiodian as a human, parts of themselves that had been hidden suddenly became visible. They too became human. In embracing Abiodian's humanity, they embraced their own. A hope for all of us, that kind of awakening, in which we open into a new day and become visible, embracing all the humanity we can embrace. As the hymn says, "Wake now my conscience, with justice thy guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted a privileged place. God's love embraces the whole human race." I'd like to read for you another poem by David Whyte. It's called "Everything is Waiting for You." I think is appropriate at a time when we're still struggling with COVID. Your great mistake is to act the drama as if you were alone, as if life were a progressive and cunning crime with no witnesses to the tiny hidden transgressions. To feel abandoned is to deny the intimacy of your surroundings. Surely even you at times have felt the grand array, the swelling presence, and the chorus crowding out your solo voice. You must note the way the soap dish enables you, or the window latch grants you freedom. Alertness is the hidden discipline of familiarity. The stairs are your mentor of things to come. The doors have always been there to frighten you and invite you. And the tiny speaker in the phone is your dream ladder to divinity. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation. The kettle is singing even as it pours you a drink. The cooking pots have left their arrogant aloofness and seen the good in you at last. All the birds and all the creatures of the world are unutterably themselves. Everything is waiting for you. Blessed be.